When you squat, lunge or walk upstairs, do you ever notice your knees cave in or your foot turn out and your low back starts complaining? This is often due to a lack of control of external hip rotation. When most people train their glutes, they train hip extension, pushing the hips forward like with hip thrusts, bridges or deadlifts. But that's not all your glutes do. Your hip is a ball and socket joint. It's meant to rotate under load, and your glutes are a huge part of that system that controls rotation. So if your glutes can't control rotation, your lower back is probably picking up the slack. If your hip can't rotate and stay stable, your back absorbs all that stress. I'm going to show you a quick self-check you can do to see how well your glutes control hip rotation. The essential job your glutes do that most people never train. The reason why weak hip rotation control can force your low back to compensate. And 3 simple exercises you can use to make your glutes work like they're supposed to. First of all, the single leg squat. You're going to stand on one leg, keeping the foot completely flat on the floor. And with the other foot, you're going to reach out as far as you can in front of you, touching your heel to the ground without your knee drifting in, your foot spinning out, or your pelvis dropping or rotating. If any of that happened, your body is compensating for what is often a lack of control at the hip. These aberrant compensations direct unwanted stress through your lumbar spine. Your glute's other job, external hip rotation. So most glute training lives in the sagittal plane, forward and backwards, hip extension. But your hip isn't a hinge joint like the knee, it's a ball and socket joint. So in real life, walking, running, lunges, sports like golf, football, tennis, your hip has to do 2 things at the same time. The first is produce force, and the second is control rotation. So the femur stays stacked underneath the pelvis, and your glutes play a major role in both. So first of all, you've got the glute max. If you look at the direction of the muscle fibers, you can understand that when these fibers contract, they externally rotate the hip as well as extend it, especially the upper fibers, which are oriented more laterally. These help control external rotation, and it keeps the thigh from collapsing inward under load. Then you've got the glute medius, which helps keep your pelvis stable on one leg and also contributes to rotational control. You can see here how its posterior fibers run more side to side, which is what helps control external rotation of the hip. Why weak rotational hip control affects the low back. So when you walk, climb stairs or do a lunge, the hip needs to rotate subtly while the pelvis stays relatively stable. When rotational control is poor, you'll often see the knee caving in or the foot turning out or the pelvis dropping to one side. And this causes motion and force that should be managed at the hip getting redirected into the lumbar spine. The joints in your lumbar spine are not ball and socket joints. The discs between the vertebrae evolved to give a little but not absorb strong rotational forces. If this becomes your standard movement pattern, it will likely result in tissue damage and low back pain. Exercises for external hip rotation. Start with rotational control that you can't cheat. Because if your default movement pattern is twisting your spine, you're not training your glutes. Exercise 1, the clamshell. You're going to lie on your side with your thighs at about 60 degrees. Then you're going to find the acis, the bony protrusion at the front of your hip with your thumb. Reach around the back with 2 fingers, touching your glute medius. So when you raise your knee, you're going to feel that muscle contracting. Okay, being careful to keep your pelvis stable, only moving through the hip. And if you want to make the movement a bit more challenging, you can put a mini band around your knees and do the same thing, okay? The resistance is a little bit more challenging here, so you have to brace your abs a little bit harder and just make sure, again, that all the movement is in your hip and you're not rotating your pelvis. Exercise 2, the side plank clamshell. So you start by getting into a side plank position, hips back, knees forward and spine straight. Then we're going to hinge forward with the hips to go up.
and just raise the knee, putting tension on the band, holding it for about 3 seconds. 3 reps, making sure to brace your abs, no movement in the pelvis, all the movement in the hip, and then we hinge back to go down. Then for the next rep, hinging forward, and then same again, keeping abs braced, raising the knee, working those external hip rotators, and then hinge back to go down.
Exercise 3, RNT split squats. RNT just means we use a band to pull you into your mistake and you resist against it. We're challenging the external hip rotators isometrically in this exercise, which just means they stay the same length. This is great if you struggle to feel your glutes doing split squats. It can also help with knee pain if your knees are weak and you tend to overload them doing this movement. Exercise 4, hip airplanes. This is a great exercise for improving controlled external hip rotation through a complete range of motion of the joint, as well as core stability and balance, which can be the most challenging aspect of this exercise. I recommend starting off by holding onto something.
I'm going to start by hinging at the hip just in front of a table where you can support yourself. Both hands on the table, make sure you've got your abs braced. And first we're going to internally rotate the hip, or rotating the pelvis on the femur, and then externally rotate as far as you can in the other direction, all the while supporting yourself on the table. So after the first rep you can reset, and then you extend your leg back behind you, internal rotation, and then external rotation, rotating the pelvis and the rib cage together as one unit.
These exercises don't replace training hip extension. Keep your hinges, hip thrusts, squats, lunges, etc. Just make sure to include some hip rotation too. All my clients have individualized programs, but generally speaking, the best way to include these for most people is to pick one of the clamshell variations to use in your warm-up, then do 2 sets of either the RNT split squats or the hip airplanes in your main workout. The goal is to build control so that your hips do what they're supposed to and your back doesn't have to step in to help. So the main point to remember is that your glutes don't just extend your hips, they control hip rotation too. And if you don't train that, your body redirects rotational force into your spine, which often results in low back pain. One of the key components of the hip airplane that we briefly touched on is the ability to lock your rib cage to your pelvis, which stabilizes your spine. This is fundamental to reduce stress on your spine and prevent low back pain. If you've ever rolled over in bed at night and felt a sharp pain in your low back when you twist your rib cage away from your pelvis, you'll know what I'm talking about. Watch this video to learn how to incorporate this essential skill into your daily movement and training.